just a moment, waiting to jump onto all of the platforms. Hopefully you're feeling amazing and you've already been implementing some of the magic of the challenge. Hello, hello. If you can see me and you can hear me. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next day of our 7-day challenge. I am so excited for today. It's one of my favorite topics in the promise in this beautiful book right here, which I'm going to be reading an excerpt from in just a moment. And it is empathy. And I want to talk about empathy because I think that when it comes to our healing process, and of course, I wrote the promise to help people heal. I think that's the greatest intention that I had there. But when it comes to healing, there's usually someone that we feel we need to forgive, including ourselves. And that seems damn near impossible. And I've noticed that when we step into something, and of course, I'm going to share kind of my idea of what empathy is. But when we step into empathy, we are kind of on the path to forgiveness, but it's not such a tall order because I think a lot of the things that we've gone through in our lives, we don't want to make excuses for those who have hurt us. And sometimes we also don't want to excuse ourselves. And forgiveness feels like too much of a release. Now, my ultimate goal is to get us to a space where we can truly forgive, that we're at such a beautiful, high vibrational space in our lives that even the terrible things that have happened to us, that we can release it. But the reason that I believe in empathy is because it helps that releasing process in such a way that empowers us. My true intention is not so much to forgive, if that makes sense, as much as it is to release us from the hold that the experience has caused in us. Because as we know, and as we've been talking about over the past couple of days in this challenge, is that these things that cause for us to kind of fragment off, they make us feel less whole. And ultimately, that makes us a little bit less authentic when we can't take our human story, build it into the divine, and bring it all with us on this crazy cool journey that we're all on. I know why that's hard. I beyond understand that there's certain things that you're like, that's just not forgivable. But empathy, there's still a space for that. There's still a container that we can dive into there. So I wanted to share a couple things. First and foremost, and this is also in the chapter on empathy in the promise, I do talk about being empathic as well. I'm not going to touch on that for the challenge today because I want to kind of harp on this whole forgiveness thing a little bit more. But I do talk about that. So I just want to scratch the surface really quickly there. And that is empathy versus sympathy. So empathy is the understanding of what someone has gone through or why someone chose what they chose, or at minimum, you're holding space for them. You can go, I understand what has happened, and also I'm not emotionally rocked by it, if that makes sense. This is something I tell my practitioners all the time. We're not numbing out at all. We are fully feeling, but we're feeling everything that's available from a high vibrational standpoint. So we're kind of in that bird's eye view, even when we're hearing, difficult things that people have gone through, or we're talking about the things that we've gone through too. And so empathy allows for us to, again, kind of create that coherence, holding that space for others and not getting lost in the experience. Now, the difference of that would be sympathy. Sympathy is basically the not only do I hear what someone's going through as they're telling me, but I am almost re-experiencing it with them. I am feeling bad for them. I am pitying them. I am, you can't hold space. You're getting lost in the emotions. Again, totally understandable sometimes, especially when someone's telling you something that's really heavy, but it doesn't serve them. And I talk about that in great detail in the book, but the short version of that and why it doesn't serve them is when you are unable to hold space for someone who is sharing very intimate or difficult things that they have done or has been done onto them, it doesn't allow for that same space of growth and healing. And instead, it actually keeps them stuck in that pain. This is not about being a victim or anything like that. Again, the things that we've been through are very justifiably wrong at times. But our intention is that we can hold a space for others, including ourselves, in such a way that it heals. Again, forgiveness is about healing so that we don't have that same hold over us anymore. And ultimately, what we're really doing is dragging that experience everywhere we go because we're unwilling to let it go. We do that for beautiful protective reasons. I understand. But what if there's another way? So empathy versus sympathy. And the next time that you experience, for anyone who is maybe a coach or a therapist or whatever it is, and you really feel like you get so lost in the pain of what others are sharing. And I have worked with many, many, many trauma survivors of every sort you can imagine. So this does apply everywhere. If you're doing this, in the way in which I'm sharing it in the promise, is instead to hold space and not get lost in the pain, because you are the beacon of light for them. And sometimes we have to be the beacon of light for ourselves. But in speaking to others, you're the beacon of light to remind them that even though they may have gone through something difficult, that they're stronger than it, that it doesn't define them, or if they choose for it to let them define them, then it can be a strength, or it can at least be an intention to help others who've gone through it. We can always transform it in some beautiful way so that it becomes something lighter. And when someone is in the woes of confusion and pain and understandable trauma, somebody needs to hold the light for them. And that means that we need to come from a calm, not neutral state, but it almost feels like neutrality, so that we can hold the space so that there's room for healing instead of only room for pain. Next, and this is what I would love to do, is just walk you through a very quick kind of a meditation of sorts of how to just kind of pour some empathy into either ourselves or to others. Now, you may find quite a bit of resistance during this if you've got some beautiful healing work to still do in certain areas. That's okay. Instead of judging it or maybe getting triggered or being frustrated with me even, just lean into it a little bit. Be like, all right, I'll play for just during this meditation, I will give it my all. That is doing so much. Cool. Okay, so if you can now, if you are driving, if you are operating heavy machinery, obviously don't do these things in this moment. But if you are in a quiet space, go ahead and close your eyes if that feels good to you. And let's just take a couple really deep, juicy breaths. Let's get our nervous system feeling nice and calm. Get that oxygen to that beautiful brain of yours so that we can really hear new information, new thoughts, new energy. All right. Beautiful. Now, as you continue these juicy, deep breaths, imagine that each breath in brings in a golden light, almost like a golden smoke, if you will. And as it goes through your body, it just waves over every part of you, going into little nooks and crannies, little dark crevices, just illuminating it with this beautiful golden light. And each breath out, if there is anything that is stuck or that the golden light is eliminating, if it needs to come out on the out breath, allow for it to be released. Breathing in unconditional love and breathing out anything that's not meant to stick with you in the highest good of all. Breathing in divine light and breathing out the sticky parts of the human experience. Breathing in empathy and understanding. And breathing out tunnel vision, or maybe false perceptions or limited views. Wonderful. Okay. Now, the last part of this meditation, imagine yourself, or envision, or you can set the intention if visualizations are difficult for you, that you're sitting inside of a pyramid. The pyramid is going over your entire body. I always put pyramids in my meditations because pyramids allow for us to maintain our homeostasis, vibrating in authenticity. And I believe in what I write about in the promise is that our authenticity allows for us to access the fullest and wholest version of us, which means that we've already empathized, we've already forgiven. So just bask in that for a moment. What does that feel like to be your authentic self? What does it feel like to be unbound by life's trials and tribulations? And what if that could be how you walk around every single day? All right, one more deep breath in and out. And you can open your eyes. Wonderful. Okay, the last thing before I read from the book, this is something I actually wrote for y'all. Empathy helps us to release toxic holds so we focus on healing instead of hurting. And I think that we've heard that a lot with that saying of the one who is angry or continues to be angry or doesn't forgive holds the stone, but they're the one who gets burned, the hot stone. I don't know if you guys have heard that before. Obviously, I just butchered it pretty well, but it's a beautiful saying. And when I look at that, I always remember if I want to be stuck in and feel justified in the things that I've gone through in pain, I can absolutely do that. That's my right. And that's not a wrong thing. I noticed for myself, I held on to that to protect myself because I didn't feel strong enough within myself to be able to maybe be around someone who has hurt me or to be able to see if it was happening again. And so there was kind of an unconscious part of me, or maybe a very conscious one that you're aware of, where if we hold that pattern and we keep it alive, then it won't repeat itself. But what we don't realize sometimes is that we are literally repeating it every moment of every day because we won't release it. And there is a version of you, and this is what I hope the promise brings to you, this book brings to you, is that there is an incredible, strong, and empowered version of you that doesn't need to hold on to pain to ensure it doesn't happen again, that doesn't have to relive it to protect yourself. And that is a beautiful way of being. And I have experienced that for myself. Although, of course, there's certain things I'm still working on in forgiveness and empathy. But my God, does it feel good to let it go? Okay, so I wanted to share a little excerpt, and then there's actually going to be some reflection questions because in this book, I actually have reflection questions sitting in between and at the end of every chapter. So it's really a workbook and a guide. You guys know how I like to do that. I want to give you that divine information, but I also want you to have kind of homework that you can simmer on and figure out how it relates to your personal journey. That's embedded throughout the book. So I figured I'd give you guys a taste of some of those reflection questions today. But first, let's do a quick reading. So I feel like this is the most important piece in regards to our talk today, and it is why empathy is not the same as forgiveness. Empathy is not the same as forgiveness. Sometimes we experience empathy on the path to forgiveness, which is the conscious and deliberate choice to release any feelings of pain or resentment towards someone who has harmed us. Forgiveness can be an amazing gift to offer, but I will never tell someone they need to forgive another person. I've encountered people who've been victims of heinous experiences, and I understand that part of their process might include owning their anger and hurt over what happened. Heck, my human self wants to go give their abuser a piece of my mind, but my divine self knows better. It's not always healthy to jump straight into forgiveness, especially if that means spiritually bypassing uncomfortable emotional experiences that need to be fully processed. It's just not for me to say when someone is ready. The beautiful thing about empathy is that it doesn't require forgiveness. When we hold empathy for someone, it's not about denying what we went through or even saying that we're ready to forgive that person. It's being able to entertain a much larger perspective that has enough room for our feelings and the clarity required for us to move from our story of victimization and woundedness and see that most acts of harm occur because of unconsciousness and unhealthy patterns that never got interrupted. We don't have to make up stories about the other person to get to this place of clarity. All we have to do is observe them closely from the vantage point of the question, what else might this mean? This can help us to pause and unhook from the old stories we've told ourselves. At this point in my journey, I can truly acknowledge that anyone who throws negativity or abuse at another person has an internal issue that has nothing to do with the person on the receiving end. When someone lashes out at me, I know not to take it personally. I understand they are going through something I may not know enough about, which helps me keep a clear head and view them as an angry toddler throwing a tantrum over not getting their popsicle before dinner. It's not for me to pick up what they're putting down, although I'm happy to love them through it with my boundaries intact. Empathy also differs from forgiveness because while forgiveness is focused on letting go, empathy is focused on understanding. Empathy gives us insight into why someone is the way they are. One need not justify a person's behavior to feel bad for them. Instead, we recognize that if we've gone through the same experiences, if we had gone through the same experiences as them, we might have made similar decisions. Or sometimes we realize we would never have done what they did. And that's also a blessing. Similar to the ways in which people bring generational patterns to an end by consciously not enacting them or passing them on to the next generation. Now, I feel like, and I'm going to give the reflection questions in a second here, but I feel like there's such a power to that because what if, and I think most of us, at least in some way, whether it's small or large, people that have hurt us are family or we feel like they're family. And when we feel like they are, that pattern sits in us and generationally continues in some way. And I know for myself, because I do have children, and I know that this is a great leverage point. So sorry, y'all, if I'm using your kids against you, but we don't want to pass that to our children. And so even if we've gone through difficult things, us healing and becoming the most whole version of us, not just, being independent, making it work in life, fighting through the hard, which is beautiful things. And thank God we have that willpower and that grit to get through life's difficulties. But if you're at a place where the life's difficulties aren't like truly happening, but you're just living in them still, and life actually looks different, or you could create boundaries or whatever that looks like, then I hope that you do it. Because every person that you touch, whether it is your children, and you could pass that pattern down to them or not, or it's someone that you just love and care about, or it's your coworkers or whatever, it is the greatest gift that you can give them to be the wholest version of you. And a part of that wholeness is allowing for yourself to, in whatever way feels right to you, come to peace with your life. And I'm not, again, urging you to bypass any part of your experience, but just to, instead of, if you're doing this, I should say, instead of being in a state of confusion or anger and frustration, which are low vibrational anyway, that you go, okay, I've sat there long enough and maybe there's a little bit more for me here. How can I, in some way, start to transmute this feeling or this experience or these emotions or whatever it is so that I can offer a higher vibrational version of me to the world? And it's not your fault something happened to you, but for myself, at least, if I can offer this, although it's not my fault, the things that have happened to me or the traumas that have been, inflicted upon me by any means. I don't believe we manifest horrible, heinous things to happen to us. But in this state of awareness that I have kind of climbed my way to throughout my life and where I'm at today, subject to change, who knows, is that I also have a responsibility to deal with it in the now. So again, wasn't my fault, but I made it my responsibility. And the reason I make it my responsibility is because it empowers me. It puts me back in the driver's seat of things that I was very much not in control of at some point that caused me pain, caused me to change myself in some ways. And I go, no, I will be responsible for how I show up anyway. And here's how I will do that. And that is so freeing. And if that's not like indirect forgiveness, I guess, just because you stop caring about people who do hurtful, horrible things, hurt people, but healed people help people. And I guess you can decide which, part of that do you want to be on, even if you would never hurt someone the way you were hurt. Maybe if it doesn't feel shameful, of course, this may not be for everybody, but maybe you go, but am I still hurting myself or someone I love by not being the full expression of me or by holding on to this pain? And we could see that as simply as maybe you have relationship trauma or something like that, and you're unable to fully open up to your partner, right? It's not maybe your fault that you have certain relationship trauma, but maybe it also feels good to say, you know what, but it's going to be my responsibility to connect with my healthy partner today instead of shutting down because of the past. Okay, the reflection question that I would like, I'm going to run you through just 4 really quickly here. You'll probably want to rewatch this video. And this is a little bit later in the chapter, but 1, can you think of an experience that you haven't fully released? How does this experience continue to take up space in your heart, your mind, and your body? Now, the point of this question is not to relive a trauma. So maybe go with something smaller, or you can skip this one if it triggers too much pain. Number 2, what belief was birthed from that thing that happened to you? So in some of my experiences in my life, it's a bad thing to be a victim. So I'm going to cover this up and not acknowledge that it happened. I did that with some of my sexual trauma. And again, that was just me wanting to, the world to perceive me as strong and for me to not acknowledge, the pain and the confusion of what had happened. But it made me less whole. Number 3, how can being in empathy with your experience help you to see clearly, close the loop, and get free from the toxic energetic hold the experience may still have over you? And 4, How can empathizing with the person or people who harmed you neutralize your connection to them and help you take your power back? All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me. As we continue to dive into the promise on our 7-day challenge. As a reminder, if you haven't already, please go get a copy. When you buy just one book, you get access to a 1-day free event. Lots of magic there. It's going to be an entire exciting thing going on in April. So you have time to get your book, read it, and then dive into some really amazing lessons that we'll be sharing at that time. And then if you buy 2 to 4 books, which I'm really excited about here because these 2 to 4 books are for friends. They are for family members. They're for your reading buddies or whatever feels good to you. Then you will also get a live energetic attunement from me. I do energy work. Believe it or not, even though I've got kind of a psychology background, energy is everything. Talk about incredible releases. So you'll also get an energetic attunement for buying 2 to 4 books. And if you are just an overachiever and you want to get 5 books, you will get a $1,000 program for free. It's called Mandy 365. It is me coaching you basically for an entire year, meditations, weekly themes, tons of different lessons, very short, so you can listen to them every day. It won't take up a crazy amount of time, but it will create massive, massive results. So please comment below how many books that you've gotten. If you've gotten your book, how is it going? I know in our book club, I have been seeing some serious magic. A lot of people who are shedding incredible tears of release and just having just a reframe to our human experiences and shifting into the divine. So I'm already so excited that my intention behind the promise being this love letter to humanity to help humanity heal, it's happening. So I hope that you will continue to be a part of it. Again, snag a copy or a couple copies if you haven't already. I'll see you in the official book club. I will see you at our live event in April. And in case no one has told you today, I love you all.